what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We are going to be diving into some more Guild Wars 2 lore today. And I have not really ventured into the world of lore in some time. However, with a new expansion on the horizon, with new territory, it would probably behoove us to open up our books, get some notes. Everyone, grab some notes. It's time for class. Class is in session. We're going to be looking at the story for Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds because we have a blog post today from Indigo and Chloe, the narrative lead and the story designer lead for the expansion. So we have some studying to do. Juicy lore. All right, let's take a look at the blog post. We have the bare necessities, a peek at the Lowland Kodan and the story of Janthir Wilds. It reads, hey there, this is Indigo, the Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds narrative lead, and Chloe, the expansion story design lead. We'd love to walk you through a high-level look at the Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds story to help set the stage for launch next month. The story of Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds is a treasure trove of intrigue and lore, both past and present, and we'll be encountering a variety of allies and enemies as we venture into the long-awaited region of Janthir. We'll be picking up right where Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure left off. Let's dive in. Did you mention, please note, light spoilers ahead. We'll be teasing a little bit about the region and current affairs surrounding the start of the expansion. So if you'd rather go in totally unspoiled, you'd best skip this one. But like, if you're already here, you know what you're getting into, so don't skip this part. You're here. You have to lock it. Your seatbelt is clicked in. You are in the ride. Keep all hands and feet inside the ride at all times, and I really hope you put your belongings in the locker next to the roller coaster, because we're not going to be held liable for anything that you might break on this ride. Bridging Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure. To get things going, let's look back at last year. Following the end of the Dragon Cycle, Tyrian had no idea what the ramifications would be. As we learned in Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure, Su Wan's death caused a powerful blast of magical instability that fractured all sorts of magical forces and barriers within Tyrian. Aurene immediately went to work re-establishing herself as a filter for those magics, and stability was quickly restored. But we've only just begun to understand the consequences of that transfer of power. Right at the onset of Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure, the commander was thrown into uncharted territory. We learned that the World Spire, a powerful conduit forged by the wizard Isgarin, was fractured following that blast. The Spire was one of the few barriers sitting between us and potential calamity, and it only took a moment for the denizens of a parallel realm to worm their way in. And thus, the commander was introduced to the long-fought war between the Astral Ward and the Cryptus. Through the story of Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure, the commander aids the Astral Ward in rescuing the Wizard's Court while toppling the malevolent Cryptus King, Eparch. While the fight against the Cryptus was won, there are a lot of stories left to be told about our wizardly new friends. The Astral Ward has proven to be a worthy ally with a benign cause, but we've barely touched the surface of some of their more questionable choices, not to mention their cantankerous leader Isgarin. We know they helped in some ways, but why didn't they get involved sooner? Where do we even start with the Fractal fiasco? Time to pull us back to the present. While the commander, now the Wayfinder, was fighting back against Eparch in Nyos, the threat of the Cryptus didn't go unnoticed by the rest of Tyria. In fact, that threat was very much noticed, and nations started talking. At the start of Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds, the commander will receive an invitation to the inaugural meeting of the Tyrian Alliance. And oh boy, do they have a lot of thoughts about our latest demonic invaders. After everything the world has endured, Tyria's patience with destruction is limited. While we want to keep some of the minutiae surrounding the Tyrian Alliance under our hats for now, including our lavish host of guest appearances, in addition to providing the player with a new directive, the Alliance also gives us the ability to demonstrate Tyria's growth outside of the main story patch. What's happening in the rest of the world? How are things... voice crack. How are things progressing when we're in the thick of adventure? I really enjoyed this recap. It's a nice abridged format for players, or maybe new players coming in for this expansion who missed Secrets of the Obscure. It gives you a brief rundown of what happened in that expansion, and because we were away from our core cast of characters, it's nice to slowly be reintroduced to everything in terms of this expansion's startup and how we're going to be able to touch base with all of the leaders of Tyria, or at least their representatives in some fashion, and how they also have responded to the Cryptis threat. And this leads us to Janthir. One of the results of this first Tyrian alliance meeting will send the commander and a very small team of allies into the dangerous wilds of the Janthir region, starting due north of Divinity's Reach over the Crichton border. The initial focus of our mission is to establish a diplomatic connection with a small faction of Kodan. The Lowlanders, while hesitant, welcome us into their village. We spend some time getting to know their culture as we explore the Lowland shore, which we'll dig into a bit more in a moment. Partway through the story, we'll be pulled even further into Janthir. That's when we'll make our way into the Isles themselves. The bay is rich with history, bloody, brutal, sullen history, and we've never strayed too close until now. We know that Saul and his fledgling White Mantle went to the Isles in search of something, leaving with an eye of Janthir. We also know that other conspicuous figures have ventured into the region too. On the first island we reach, Janthir Sintry, we'll begin to unravel the tragic history behind the ruined village of Gavril. But that's a good spot to pause because most importantly, bears, the Lowland Kodan. One of the most exciting things to dig into has been our new faction of Lowland Kodan, who have called Janthir their home for many generations. Despite the region being viciously dangerous and inhospitable, they are expert survivalists and have carved out a comfortable, even cozy, way of life in these lands. All Lowlanders are capable fighters and learn survival tactics from the time they are cubs. The Wayfinder will spend much of their time in Janthir learning about and learning from the Lowlanders, as they have much to teach. As a population isolated from their northern Kodan cousins for so long, and living in such a different environment, they're a little different than the Kodan we are familiar with. Perhaps the most notable difference lies in their spiritual belief system. Unlike other Kodan, who revere the will and balance of Koda, the Lowland Kodan hold and reverence the environment, the relationship they maintain with it, and the responsibility they have as stewards of the land. Rather than viewing themselves as enlightened protectors chosen by Koda, Lowlanders act out of duty to maintain necessary balance in a harsh place where taking is easier than giving and survival can be difficult. These differences trickle down through other aspects of their society. Kodan leadership is typically a partnership between a spiritual mouthpiece of Koda, called a voice, and a physical protector, called a claw. However, the Lowland Kodan have a claw as their sole leader, a feature of the society that goes back as far as anyone can remember. Claw is not without balance, though. A council that represents key roles in the village lends the Claw perspective and advice. As the Wayfinder spends more time with a Lowland Kodan and begins to earn their trust, we'll gain more glimpses into their lives and their history as denizens of Janthir. First and foremost, I'm surprised that they even hinted at some of the region names of the islands of Janthir, such as Janthir Sintry? I wasn't really expecting to get much information out of a little bit deeper into the expansion, like from the halfway mark on. However, mostly because it's not really something Guild Wars 2 does. However, I think it is important, especially when venturing into a completely new territory, that they do give us some grounding lore and grounding knowledge, just so you don't go in completely blind. Because sometimes it's nice to know what you're getting yourself into to, I don't know, have a little bit of a safety net than when you're going into the expansion, be like, I'm familiar with these names. So it's not like a complete tsunami of information where you're just like, oh my god, there's so many names and places I have to memorize now. So I'm really happy that they're doing this. We'll get into the rest of this article, but I hope they mention the Titans and the threat that we're going to be experiencing in this expansion. Because sometimes we're left with very little knowledge in terms of who we're fighting. The only time that we got more knowledge out of our enemies was really in Heart of Thorns. Well, I guess this is the last little section. It's heading north to Janthir. The inhabitants of Tyria are on the cusp of a new era. It's time for nations to ally and work together on a more global scale. Those seeds of alliance were planted under the threat of the Elder Dragons, but the need did not end with the Elder Dragons. As new threats rise, it's good to have friends on your side. What better place to start than with the people living next door? The Lowland Kodan might prove to be valuable allies if we can earn their trust and convince them it's worthwhile to join the global conversation. We're so excited to be able to give some first looks into the narrative of Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds. There is so much fun existing lore and history to dig into and build upon with new stories and characters. We can't wait for you to experience it all. Now, one thing I really wish that they talked about the threat and the Titans. Because, well, maybe they will in another blog post, but I found it would have been the best place to talk about that here, just because everything is grounded in this narrative blog post. And I think it would give them a lot of benefit to talk about the Titans, because while it hasn't been officially announced, it's been officially announced on other interview websites that developers have gone on to talk about the expansion. And for those of us who really haven't played the entirety of Guild Wars 1, who might have only played little snippets here and there, I know I don't really have a lot of personal experience with the Titans, and getting a little bit of a lore primer and a little bit of a warm-up would be nice, just to have some pre-existing knowledge going into it to kind of understand what the Titans are, how they act, how maybe some char historically interacted with them. So I do know a little bit about the Titans, but when you're starting a new expansion, you always have to think about the players who really are going into it with no knowledge of previous, especially Guild Wars 1 story. Everyone, that was the story of Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds. This is kind of what we're going to be getting into in terms of venturing to Janthir, uncovering secrets, lost secrets, maybe of the Mersat. They talk about the Eye of Janthir. The Eye of Janthir was shown off to us in the very last story patch that we had, and then we got a good primer on the Kodan in terms of their different way of life compared to the Kodan we know of, and how their spiritual belief is more focused on the environment, their actual governance is just solely put on the Claw. However, there is a bit more of like a council vibe where people will come to the Claw with, you know, input and whatnot. So I like that. I think it's really cool that we are getting a little bit of an explanation as to how these Kodan are different, not just visually, but in terms of how they function in a story format. And that was kind of it. We didn't really get a lot about anything else in terms of antagonists. But we did get mention of the Tyrian Alliance and how that might be a new group or a new political structure that has spawned from the Dragon Cycle ending and also this Cryptus threat. So, look, everyone, thank you so much for coming on by. This was a story warm-up primer explanation of Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds. I'm really excited to get into the story for Guild Wars 2 because I want to play around with fantasy and the Kodan and big rocky monsters. Thank you all for coming on by. Once again, if you'd like to pre-order Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds, I have links down below in the description. You can get your own special pre-order bonuses today. Don't miss out. And if you'd like to support me on the channel further, you can like, subscribe, and comment, and head on over to Patreon. Get early access to videos and some new exclusive videos that I'm going to be cooking up very shortly. So thank you all for coming on by, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone! So hot and sweaty, this is not okay.